Welcome! This is Reading Goodreads Part 3, and in this video we are going to read the winners of the 5 categories that I haven't read from yet. So that is sci-fi, romantasy, romance, horror and mystery thriller. We're going to go do those 5 categories. We're going to look at the winners together so that you can see my reaction to what happened. We're going to get some reading done, see if the winners deserve to be the winners, in my opinion, my very humble opinion. I'll just see what we like and what we don't. Hope you enjoy. It's also Bookmas, by the way. This is also a Bookmas video, so merry Bookmas. What? The winners are out. The winners are out. I'm so excited for this. I'm so excited to see what I'm going to be reading. So, the categories that I had already read from are mystery thriller, romance, fantasy, science fiction, and horror. So I'm going to look at all the others and see if any of the books I read won. Because I don't think they did. I don't think they did. Let's start with fiction. The Wedding People. I did not read that. Oh, here, one moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got 5th. I hope this finds you well. That's fine. Historical fiction. I hope James won. The Women. Of course it was Kristen Hanna. Oh, James came second. James came second. I'm okay with that. I read fantasy. So Heavy on the Sea. So Heavy on the Sea won. Oh, I'm happy about that. I really enjoyed it. Debut novel? I don't think. No. How to End a Love Story. We Used to Live Here came 3rd. That's pretty good. It wasn't my thing, but I'm glad that it did well. Audiobook. Now, Here One Moment already disappeared from that, so we'll see. I think. Oh, Funny Story one. Okay. I wonder if that means Funny Story will win the romance. Young adult fantasy. Ruthless Vows. Heartless Hunter came 3rd. Acceptable. Young adult fiction. Dungeons and Dragons didn't make it. Heartstopper. Okay. Oh, so I guess Dungeons and Drama was at the top of the ones that got cut. Non-fiction. Madness. Oh, I guess it's Want, right? Where did Want come? The Anxious Generation. 4th. Pretty close to 3rd, but definitely 4th. Okay. Memoir. I don't think Sociopath will have won. Oh, of course. Oh, Sociopath came 2nd. History and biography. Okay. I wanted Madness to do well in this. Shall we see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It came 13th. Mystery thriller. So the one that I'd read from mystery thriller was God of the Woods. I don't think God of the Woods will have won because I don't think it's everyone's cup of tea. And I think normally more thrilling books win. Holy shit. Oh, it won, and it won by a lot. Oh, good for her. Good for her, man. It's nice to see that like such a complex book won, one that has like such interesting discussion topics won, like one that you can really think about one rather than just kind of like a exciting thrill ride. I'm really glad that it won. That's exciting. Romance. I think Funny Story will have won, which screws up my 2025 plans, but I'm okay with reading it. Yeah. Funny Story. Okay, that's book number 1. Funny Story by Emily Henry, book number 1. Romantasy. What had I read from Romantasy? I don't even remember, but I guess we'll find out. House and Flamer's Shadow! Okay, that's fine. I've already read it. I wanted Quicksilver or When the Moon Hatched to win, I think. Or Phantasma. Was anything close? No. House and Flamer's Shadow just like absolutely... Well, it's Sarah J. Maas. Science fiction. So... the one I'd read from this is Orbital, and there is a chance that Orbital won because it won the Booker Prize, so I'm sure it has quite a few readers who paid attention to it because of that. The Mystery of Time. This also fucks with my 25. Okay, that's fine. I did really want to read it. Orbital did okay. Okay, that's the second book, Mystery of Time. So I've read 2. And I have to read 2. Oh, fuck. Reader came second. Okay. You Like It Darker by Stephen King. Well, it'll be my first Stephen King. It's a short story collection. For me, short stories, it really depends how short the short stories are. If it's... Oh, is that true? I have read some really, like, absolutely terrifying, just like 1-page stories that have really done well for me. Stories that hover between, like, 10 and 40 pages don't normally do it for me. And I'm really glad when a short story is between like 50 and 100 pages. I know that's entering like novella length, but that is my preferred length for a short story. Okay. Okay. I will talk to you about the books I already read at some point so that we can talk about all the winners that I've read. But we have 3 books now to read in this video. Funny Story, The Ministry of Time, and Some Like It Darker. I just have to get my hands on Some Like It Darker, because I have the other 2. Woo! Yeah. I had like mixed feelings about having to read Funny Story, because I want to read it. Don't get me wrong, I really want to read it, and I want to expand my Emily Henry knowledge base. But the thing I was worried about is that people say this is her most commercial book. And the thing I loved about Happy Place was that it was so different to anything that I've read before, and it felt like a really unique story in the way it was told, and it felt like this beautiful coming of age, rediscovering yourself book. So I really felt like Emily Henry was going to offer me new things in terms of what I was reading within romance. She was going to give me new perspectives. She was going to make me try new tropes that I wasn't sure I was going to like. And this, 100 pages in, is fine. It's fine. For those who don't know, it's about... Oh, is it Violet? Daphne. Fourth wing on the brain. It's about Daphne, who is about to get married, and her soon-to-be husband goes for his bachelor party, and when he comes home, he admits to her that his long-term childhood best friend, Petra, confessed her love for him and that they're going to be together, and gives her a week to leave the house. So she moves in with Petra's ex, Miles, and they're both just existing in this weird situation where their exes have gotten together and betrayed them both, and it's all weird. Miles is gorgeous. Miles is gearing up to be one of the favourites I've ever had. Daphne is this kind of quiet, socially isolated girl who is starting to rediscover her ability to exist in a world outside of her relationship. They get invited to their ex's wedding, and they get drunk and say they'll go, and then the next day her ex phones up and is like, you don't have to come, we don't want to make you feel bad, we'd love to have you, but we understand there are emotions involved, and blah blah blah. And so out of kind of spite and not wanting to be pitied, she immediately retorts, I'm coming with my boyfriend, and my boyfriend is Miles. And unlike most fake dating books, Miles is immediately on board. He's immediately like, whatever you need to do to make yourself feel better, I'm there for you. Love that in a man. I feel like the main difference I'm noticing is just a difference in the writing style. In Happy Place, I was really blown away by the kind of atmosphere created by the descriptions of stuff. I was really intrigued by the way that she created feelings within descriptions rather than just an accurate description of what's going on. The descriptions had emotions within them. Whereas with this, I haven't picked up that kind of emotional descriptive writing. It feels a little bit more straightforward, it feels a little bit more direct, it feels a little bit more to the point, and it's making me less intrigued with what's going on. I don't feel like this one is doing anything special so far. I have a fairly structured prediction for how this book is going to go, and I think if that's the route that she takes, I'm just going to feel underwhelmed. If I could predict the whole story 100 pages in, then what am I even reading it for? Why am I spending the time with these characters if I can already guess their whole storyline from the first 100 pages? Hopefully there'll be some surprises in here that catch me off guard, but right now I'm just a little bit apprehensive about how the rest of the book is going to go. I'm this far through. I have this much left and nothing has happened. I kept waiting for something to happen so that I could talk to you about it, and there's just nothing. There's friendship, they're falling in love, there's tragic family backstory, but there is just no conflict. I don't feel a sense of like anticipation or climax, or like it's building to anything. But saying all that, I'm not hating it. At least this far into the book, it's just this very sweet story of two people getting to know each other, and the main character getting to know herself outside of a relationship. Getting to understand what drives her, what makes her happy, what makes her feel contented, what makes her feel safe, like what kind of terrible assumptions she's made about herself because of the way she's been treated in the past by people who supposedly care about her. It's a very kind of simple story. There isn't too much going on. There's not a whole lot of plot happening. I thought that going to the wedding would have been more of a, I don't know, plot device than it has been. It seems to have been completely forgotten. It was just used at the beginning to put them into this fake dating scenario, and even then the fake dating has barely happened because they've barely been around their exes, so there's been no need for them to pretend in front of anyone really. There's only been a couple of instances of it, and everyone else is in on the secret, so it's not like they're having to hide it from their friends. Is that too spoilery? I don't think it is. They are good characters. There is good communication between them, which is something that doesn't always happen in books, so I'm quite glad that it's happening in this one. But I just wish there was a little bit more of a plot, a little bit more of this sense of things building. There is a countdown in the book towards something, but it feels like that countdown is essentially negated at this point. It doesn't feel very impactful. It was to do with a decision the main character was making, and now it feels pretty obvious what her decision is going to be. So I don't feel particularly invested in the countdown. Happy Place was such an emotional read for me. It packed such an emotional punch, and this just hasn't done that at all. I haven't felt any kind of emotional reaction to basically anything that's happened. And the characters feel almost a little bit too perfect. They have flaws, but the flaws are to do with the way they've been treated in the past. So it's not really a flaw they can claim, it's a flaw that has resulted from their treatment. I just don't feel like it's doing anything special. It's enjoyable enough, I'm having a fine time reading it, I am getting through it pretty quickly, but I don't feel like there's this need to keep reading it. I feel like the book could have ended here and it would have been a fine book, and I have no idea what's coming, or whether it's just going to be another like 100 pages of the same. So I don't feel super motivated to keep reading, but I'm going to, and I'm going to finish it. Let's get it done! This book, man. I gave it 3.5. this was a good book. It has a good storyline, it has great characters, but it just didn't do anything special. I didn't notice anything in this book that made me go, oh my god, I loved it, or oh my god, this was such an emotionally impactful book. It just felt fine. And I wish I could tell you more about it, but there's kind of just nothing more to say. It exists, and I had a fine time reading it. Love Miles. I love Miles to death. He is one of my favourite characters, but I found Daphne, is that her name? Yeah, I found Daphne a little bit infuriating at times, and that is me as someone who identifies with her, right? Like, we have similar stuff that has happened in our lives, and she still behaves in a way that I found frustrating at times. Do I want to tell you anything else? Is there anything else to say? I think I could go on and on about how much I love Miles, about how he isn't depicted as so many kind of typical romance men are, that he's attractive, that he's not God's gift to women, that he's thoughtful and kind but not sickly sweet, that they bond on an emotional level before anything intimate happens, and that he's just so supportive of her. I think all those things are just great. I just wish that, I'm not sure what I wish. I just wish there had been something more to this, something to make it stand out, something that made it feel really unique. And there just wasn't anything. It just fell a bit flat for me. Do I think this deserved to win the romance category? I don't remember what else was in there. Ooh, the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. I enjoyed that more. But this felt more grounded than the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. This has more of a realistic tone. So maybe that's why people like it, is that it feels very real, very true to life. Even though it's like a ridiculous situation to be in, right? Their reactions and the way things kind of play out for them feels very true to life and like a real experience, which I guess is a good thing about the book. I don't know. It just didn't work for me. I've waffled on long enough about it. I'm upset that I didn't enjoy it more. House of Flame and Shadow won the romancy category. I forgot this came out this year, but it is the conclusion of Bryce and Hunt's storyline in the Crescent City series. I didn't read this book for Bryce and Hunt. By the time I got to this book, I was bored of Bryce and Hunt, but I was excited about the new relationships that were happening here, and I was really interested as to what happened to some of Bryce's friends. So I read this book for them, and I felt like they had a really good go of it. The ending and the peril in the ending did really get me. I really enjoyed that. But I think as a whole, this is one of the weaker installments in the series. I know a lot of people had big reactions to this book in terms of disappointment, but that wasn't the case for me. I enjoyed it. But I've enjoyed other romantasy more than this. And so to have Sarah J Maas just kind of win again because of her popularity is a little bit disappointing. I think the Crescent City series is my least favourite of her series. So if you're new to Sarah J Maas, maybe don't start with this one. It's definitely her most adult books, and she spends the least time explaining what's going on, I think. There is some crossover between the series, but I don't think it matters too much which order you read them in. There's a lot going on in this book. There's a lot going on. That's why it's 900 pages. And I wish that I had loved this more than I did, or that it stuck with me more than it did. When I first read it, I actually gave it 5 stars. I thought, oh, wow, this was brilliant. But the more I sat with it, the more I thought about it, the more I lowered the rating. There are some decidedly cringy moments in this book which just feel very juvenile in the context in which they happened. But I would really like someone other than Sarah J Maas to win the romantasy category, because there's just so many great fantasy romance authors out there that I wish they got more recognition for writing fantastic books. But I had a good time with it. I did have a good time with it. It didn't put me off the series. It didn't make me want to stop reading Sarah J Maas or anything like that. I had a really fun time. And I don't have anything else to say about it. That's it. I'm done. Hello. Can you see me? Oh. Let's talk about the Ministry of Time. Ministry of Time. I'm nearly 100 pages in. And the concept is we have a so far nameless narrator who is a woman of Cambodian and British descent who is working for the government, and she gets a new job to be a bridge. And what a bridge is the government has figured out time travel, and they hop back in time, they pick someone up at the moment of their death, and then they bring them to current time, and it's the bridge's job to introduce that person to the modern world and what it's like to live in the modern world. I picked up the audiobook for this so that I could listen to it on walks, and I think that that was a mistake, because I think there are aspects of this book that could really be working for me that are just failing me in the audiobook, and one of them is the humour. I think there's quite a lot of humour in this book, but the really deadpan delivery of the narrator just isn't working for me. And the other thing that isn't working is that the narrator seems to pause at the end of every sentence. So it feels really disjointed to me. It doesn't feel like a really good flowing narrative. And I feel like that is just down to the narration not being my style. I'm going to give up on the audiobook and I'm going to read this physically, and I'm going to hope that my attitude towards it improves, because at the moment I'm not super enjoying it. I'm not loving it. I'm not having a good time. But the concept is so good, I feel like I can love it. And it's got romance in it, and you can see those little glistening breadcrumbs of romance. So I want to be having a better time than I am. That's my goal. To enjoy this book the best that I can, and the audiobook is not that for me. So I'm going to try picking it up physically from now on. Ow! I am that far through. I have like 100 pages left. And honestly, I'm just like struggling through it. I'm not engaging with it in any way. I feel like there's this kind of odd writing to it where instead of feeling the emotions, the characters are intellectually analysing their emotions. There was this whole section where she was dealing with depression, and instead of describing what depression felt like to her, she more described it as a series of symptoms. So instead of being like, I'm not a writer, I can't tell you what I was expecting, but instead of describing her emotions to surrounding the incident that caused the depression, she would just be like, I didn't get out of bed until 11, I didn't eat food, I didn't shower, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. And then the next day came and I repeated those things. So instead of being like, I was too despondent to get out of bed, or I was too upset to have a shower, or I was too overcome with grief to eat food, my stomach was too full, like you could do it beautifully, right? Like my stomach was so full of grief that there was no room for food within it. Instead of that, she just said, I didn't want to eat. And it's quite like this factual way of describing depression rather than an emotive way of describing depression. And I think I connect most to characters when I understand their emotions. So this lack of emotiveness means I feel at a distance to them. I feel at a distance to the characters. And I think that's why I'm struggling with it so much. I'm not super enamored with the romance in the book, which I thought was the thing that was going to really sell it for me. It didn't ever really feel like there was a change in perspective. There's a kind of blame on the fact that they're from different time periods for the slight miscommunication between them that doesn't really make sense to me, because even if they didn't portray themselves in a way that would make sense in our current time period, I still think the guy would have had an understanding of what it looked like from his time period, and he did none of those things. So I'm just not loving it. There is this big kind of wider plot going on that I thought would be interesting, but I don't really understand who to root for. That feels quite confusing. It just feels like a series of events is happening and I'm not quite sure where any of it's going or what the point of them are. I just know they're happening. So I'm not loving it. And now there's all this ominous shit about the end. And so I'm worried that I'm going to hate the end. What a depressing update. What a depressing bloody update. Sorry. I'm sorry. Oops. I didn't want to hate this book. I wanted to love this book. But I think I hated it. Hate feels like a really strong word. There are things about this that I really just didn't get. I didn't get the romance. It wasn't for me. It felt a bit weird. Like there's a power dynamic there that I didn't super love. I didn't like the overall plot. It felt convoluted and not super explained well. And I didn't love the writing, which I'm really sad about. I think that there's this want for the book to come across as deeply intelligent, but what it came across as to me is as kind of confused. There were a lot of really mixed metaphors and a lack of emotional explanation in favor of complicated, kind of cold language. I originally put this as a 3, but I actually think it's somewhere in the 2s. This just ended up not being a book for me, and that's okay. Oh, I don't even know if I would recommend it. I've discovered since picking this up that a lot more people don't like this book than I realised, and it makes me surprised that it won. But I guess it just had such a big presence that it had a lot of readers that this perhaps was the only book they'd read in the sci-fi category, so they put a lot of weight on this book. I just wish I had something more positive to say. I wish I could tell you something I really enjoyed about it, but there just wasn't anything. The humour. I felt like the humour in this book was pretty good. When it's this dry sarcasm throughout the book, which feels very British to me. It's this very British dry sarcasm, and I did enjoy that. That is one aspect of the book I did enjoy. But the rest of it, just no. So, The God of the Woods won mystery thriller, and I'm actually really glad it did. I gave this book, I think, 4.25. The premise is essentially that there's a summer camp and it's owned by this family, and years ago the young boy in the family went missing. Now his sister has gone to the summer camp and has also gone missing. That is kind of the whole premise of the book. There's a lot of timelines in the book. There's a lot of point of views in the book, and I feel like that could get confusing, but I think it was handled really well. I never got annoyed that we were in one timeline or one perspective over another, and I think the author did a really good job at making each of the perspectives individual. The people who say this book is a thriller are lying. This book is a pure mystery. This is a mystery book and it's incredibly literary. There is very few thrilling aspects about it. There isn't any high action, high drama moments. It's a very touching story. There's a lot of theming around being a woman in this time period. I can't remember exactly when it's set, in the 70s, I think. Because it spans such a big time frame, you kind of forget exactly what's going on. But the main disappearance that we're following is in 1975. So there's a lot of talk about what it's like to be a woman or a girl in this time period, and the power that they do or don't have, the power that they struggle with, or the power that has been put on them, or the power that they are struggling against. There's a lot of talk about that in the book, and because we follow so many different perspectives, we follow a lot of different types of people, and I thought that was really good. I'm really glad this won, because I feel like it's kind of a step in a new direction for mystery, for the mystery category. It's not a fast-paced thriller, it is a slow literary mystery, and that I think is a really good thing to have won, because I think it shows that people can be interested in more complicated and deeper storylines than just a quick page turner. So I'm glad this won, and I'm happy to have read it. I would recommend you read it. The audiobook is also good. I read along to the audiobook and really enjoyed that experience of it. So yay. Yay. Hello, hello. I am reading You'd Like It Darker by Stephen King. I am 4 short stories in. This is a short story collection, supposedly for people who like dark stuff. And I have had a really mixed feelings towards the books. The short stories. First one, didn't like. It was only 60 pages. I put it down 3 times because I was so bored. Second one, only 10 pages. Loved it. I thought it was great. Shocking, twisty. Wow. Thought it was great. Third one, I didn't get the point of at all. And then the fourth one, I was listening to the audiobook and I started listening to it and I was like, okay, I'm sure I'll get through this quite quickly. All the other ones have been relatively short. And then turns out it was like 150 pages. That's a novella. That's a novella. That is not a short story. But I did really enjoy it. I thought that it was a really good story. I would have read that as a standalone novella and been happy with my purchase. That's great. But it does mean that I'm now halfway through the book, which is later than I normally check in with you. So it's a really mixed bag. I've enjoyed half and I haven't enjoyed half. So far, no idea why this was in horror. No idea why this was in horror. It's mildly thrillery. Mildly. But it's just not doing much. I think my expectations were a bit high because this is my first Stephen King and everyone's like, oh, he's a master, he's a great writer, he's so prolific, everyone loves his books. I was really expecting to be completely wowed by the books. And that last one, that 150 page one, what's it called? Let me tell you the actual name. Someone's Dream. Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. That one, totally worth it. Totally worth it. The rest of them, not living up to my expectations, I would say. The other thing that's interesting about this book is this is the first book I've read that has direct COVID references, and it's odd how surreal that feels now, how weird a time it was, and revisiting that through these short stories is just bizarre. It's bizarre for me. But I'm gonna keep going with it. I'll try and check in with you once more before finishing it. I'll get a couple more stories in. And I'll tell you if it actually turns into a horror. If there's If there's any horror in this, I will tell you. Because I'm looking for it. I'm looking for the horror. I'm just not finding it. I'm not finding it anywhere. It's not going well. It's not going well. I have 2 stories left and it's not going well. We finally had a story that I would describe as horror. It was kind of scary and had a supernatural element to it. So I was finally like, yes, absolutely, this is horror. This is not a thriller anymore. That story there was a horror. But just one story makes this whole book a horror. Do they have to put it in horror because of that one story? I really thought I was going to be blown away by the imaginative nature of this book. I thought that it was going to be really inventive stories, really interesting and intriguing stories that took my perception of things and put them on their heads, but they honestly feel like he's been given a series of very mundane writing prompts. Like, a husband thought his wife was an alien. Proceed. Or, people get held up on the side of the road. Proceed. Or, someone gets mistaken for a gang member. Proceed. Like, there are all these really kind of mundane premises, which really surprised me. I will admit there are a couple that go against that. So the turbulence expert, I thought, was a really unique premise. I felt like that one was really interesting and unique. But beyond that, I just haven't seen anything inspiring in any of these stories. I haven't felt amazed by their concepts. Am I just being mean for the sake of being mean? I don't think so. There are some that I like. I like The Fifth Step. I like Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. I like The Turbulence Expert. I kind of liked Rattlesnakes. And now there's 2 left. And maybe they'll be amazing. But overall, this just hasn't been for me so far. This just hasn't been for me. And that is so depressing. I finished it. I liked one and I didn't like one. I think this had like a 50% success rate for me. The Answer Man is another one that I would say is a specifically interesting concept. The number of men in here who have lost their wives and children is pretty staggering. It's a pretty common theme running throughout a lot of the stories. I found out that Rattlesnakes is some kind of prologue to Cujo, and I would say that The Dreamers is another one that I would consider a horror. So I could do the maths. I could sit and rate each of the stories and then come up with an average from that. But I'm just going with my gut and I'm giving this 3.25. That's where I've settled with this book. There were some that really worked for me, but there were a lot that really didn't. The ones that really didn't work were more, I had a more extreme feeling about them than I had the ones that really did. The one that I really loved was Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. I think that was the only one out of the whole book that I really loved, and I would have been happy if it had been released as a standalone novella and I could have just read that. I would have been content. But for me, there were just too many that fell flat, and I'm pretty sad that this is in the horror category because it just doesn't feel like a horror collection to me. It's more of a thriller collection, I would say, and it's just like those 2 slightly more horror-ish stories just pushed it into that horror genre, and I think it could have not been there. I think it could have been in thriller. That's the book done. That is the book done. That's it. This is my pile of books that we talked about in this video. We had a 3.25, somewhere in the 2s, a 4-ish, 4.5-ish and a 3.5-ish. And with that, I've talked about in this series a book from every category of the Goodreads Choice Awards. In a stunning turn of events, I think this was actually the least successful part. Reading the winners, which should have produced my favourite books, just absolutely did not. I feel so bad for saying that. I feel bad for saying, like, maybe the winners aren't the best, but for me personally, that's the way it turned out. I enjoyed other books I've read in this series so much more than I enjoyed the books in this one. Does that mean I'm contrary? Maybe. Maybe it does. Maybe I just don't have popular opinions, and that's okay too. I don't know if I'll do the same next year. This last week of reading has felt like such a slog to get through that it makes me not want to pick the winners next year, because it just wasn't a fun time for me, really. Worse things happen, right, than reading a couple of books I don't like. Are you surprised? Are you surprised by this result? I'm surprised. What a downer of a video, am I right? Well, if you stuck through it, thank you for sticking with me. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe and comment and do all that stuff. As this is Bookmas, I will see you in a couple of days. And if you haven't already seen the other Goodreads stuff, go give them a watch. They are much more successful than this one was. And I will see you in the next video. Bye bye bye.